Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Leaders in Value Chain podcast. My name is Fei Yu. I'm the Managing Director at Alcott Global. Today, we'll talk about the supply chain of the chemical sector. And our special guest is Hanno Bruemmer. Hanno is the EVP Supply Chain and Logistics for EMEA and LATAM at Covestro. And this is a huge chemical company of 15 billion revenue. Hanno is a PhD chemist. He started his career at Bayer on the shop floor. Hanno has held positions of increasing responsibilities, covering various functions on a regional and global scale. He has gained in-depth knowledge in safety, quality, reliability, and operational excellence. And Hanno has a big passion for developing talent, and he's a big believer in driving innovations to create business competitiveness. Hanno, really great to have you here with us.
Hello, Faye. Hello, everybody. Very nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me. It's an outstanding series with many very interesting interviews, podcasts that you've already produced, and it's really an honor for me to be a part of this now. So very welcome to everybody. Glad to be here.
Thank you. So Hanno, I actually did some research about you. You're not a typical supply chain person. You have an interesting career. You've actually covered different topics. And you are also a connector. You're also on social media. You have your Twitter, on Instagram. So interesting career. And I believe that many supply chain leaders can learn from you. Could you please share your career journey into supply chain and also what's your recipe for a successful career in supply chain?
Yeah, happy to do that, Faye. And as you mentioned, yes, I'll be very honest. When I started my career, when I started my education, actually, I would not have known that it would lead me to supply chain at one point in time. Even the choice of my career. So in my career, there's been many steps where at one point in time, something got decided because somehow an opportunity, let's say with my capabilities, but then also with a certain mentor in place, really took a certain decision to, and that really shaped my career because it took a different direction. As you mentioned, I'm a chemist, but nobody in my family is a chemist. Even at my school, chemistry was very underrepresented. So probably I would have never had studied chemistry. But here comes this first turning point. I spent a year in high school in the United States, and due to some mix-up, I actually ended up in a very advanced chemistry class with a very inspiring chemistry teacher. And that made me really think about why not? Why not chemistry? Not so much maybe from the person that has always played with, I don't know, with chemicals and doing that, but really interested in the science and interesting in the industry and what you can do with it and how you can shape the world with new chemicals, materials. And that's how I ended up studying chemistry. And then also doing my career, as you mentioned, I started as a typical PhD chemist does in research a few years. And here comes the opportunity to try out production and technology. And I thought it was very interesting to see products that we have done in the lab in small scale, to see them in pilot and development scale. So I tried it out. On the other hand, in the end, I stayed 20 years in production at many different locations in Germany, in the United States, at different locations. But that led me really to opportunities when somebody offered me something and trusted in me and gave me something which is big, maybe a little bit bigger than I thought as a new role, but also going abroad and taking global roles. I always felt inspired, and I always had somebody that trusted in me and gave me the opportunity. Mm-hmm. And then here comes 3 years ago, the supply chain area was reorganized and was actually increased significantly because the commercial part of supply chain, which we start supply chain from the customer service, from the transport management, and then let's say credit and customs management, but the entire logistics used to be decentralized. And 3 years ago, we decided that we will bundle supply chain and logistics together because they need to be in one hand. Mm-hmm. And that was the perfect opportunity also for somebody with my background on production, on manufacturing, on running that globally, to step into that role and add, let's say, the commercial part on top of it. So again, here comes an opportunity. Here comes something that fits from the capability standpoint, but also somebody that trust in you, say you can step into that role, take those additional responsibilities, but also leverage on what you know. And that has really shaped my career and now led me to be responsible for supply chain and logistics.
And from your view, like having different experience across the globe and also having done different parts of operations, would that be something that help you to talk to the management, right? To voice up to the board level?
It does. It's quite an interesting question, especially again, coming back to the past. If you're a chemist and you're doing projects and you need maybe approval for a certain investment or for a certain technology, of course, you have to boil it down. What is important? I remember very well when we were going for an investment, very technical investments in one of the sites where I was working at. And since the project had a certain size, I needed to present the projects to the board. So if I really went into all the technical details, the question is, do I get my point across? But what does it really do for the people? So I actually explained not the technology, but I explained this was a driving digitalization going to a full automation of a site, which was still rather manual operated and non-digital. And I showed what it does to the people if they were now operating with a digital system. And I even got the feedback in the sense of that was good that it was not, let's say, a chemistry talk or technology talk, but more a talk, what does this investment do for our people and then for the operations? So that has, as a chemist, you always have to learn to translate into that. And that has shaped, and it's the same thing with supply chain. Supply chain is full of measures and processes. And we have KPIs and we talk in all these kind of acronyms. On the other hand, what's important for a business leader to make a decision on a certain supply chain setup? If we want to optimize something on the logistics network, when we want to drive digitalization in a certain area, we always need to come from what does it do to your customers? What does it do to your cost? What does it do to your lead times? Versus explaining all the acronyms that we are using and being too specific, let's say, in our technical language. That's something I can only advise everybody to always put the picture in front of you. What is your audience and what is your order? What is the drivers of your audience? And please address those.
We also hear a lot from supply chain people saying that, okay, we have millions of problems to face and we don't have time to communicate. We don't have time to voice up. We don't have time on social media. You have a big business to manage. You have a lot of day-to-day, and you also have, plus the customer supply chain part is a lot of problems, and you're busy. But now you're doing podcasts, you're speaking an event, you have your Twitter, you have Instagram. How do you manage that? What does it mean, right? Would that help the team in your leadership? Share with us.
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I learned that sometimes people ask, okay, you have 20 years of production experience. What was one of the biggest change when you came to supply chain? Again, it's about processes, about investment, about delivering, maybe not so much manufacturing, but still some of the things are quite similar. On the other hand, yes, supply chain has the tendency to be even more fast-paced than in production. Many things are happening. Every day there's something, some good news, but also maybe some difficult news, because you have so many, let's say, trucks on the road, so many deliveries happening, so many credit flows everywhere from different countries with credit notes, with currencies, with customs topics. Every day there's something. So yes, you can get lost in details and find that out. But this is also about, let's say, sharpening the saw to say, okay, what is the things we need to focus on? We need to make sure that a lot of things that we do, although they are complex, we get into more automation. That's really the thing, that a normal classical order, and this is now possible, we have so-called front-end automation, so that we have a customer experience. They can go to a portal, they can enter their order, even on the change, they can see their change, they can track their order. It's very important that we get able that the majority of our orders, of our deliveries run automated, and then we can focus on topics which are really crucial. And even with new technologies, we will be able that playing scenarios much quicker and making decisions fast quicker. What it means for me personally is also the topic, how do you empower your team also being sure, being available for solving these topics and getting that overview and not me diving to all the details. Everything that I invest also, when you speak about, let's say, social media, just to do an example, when we speak about social media, when I'm on Instagram, you will see that it's a purely business view. You see what I'm doing, where I'm meeting, what I'm talking about. But it's also for me a method of reaching out to talent, because the talent of today, which is in the company, maybe they're at LinkedIn or the professional networks, but the talents of tomorrow who are in university, who are in education, who think about what's a job career, they are more on social media like Instagram, and they reach out and they ask me questions. What does it mean to do this job? So it's a part of also my activity in my role to get the connections to university, to see what is driving them, what is their topics. Then even from that, it creates exchanges because people invite me to speak somewhere. I had a very interesting experience in Corona time when we were all locked down. I had university lectures in India and in Ecuador. I would probably never fly for one lecture to Ecuador or to India, neither from the time, not from the, let's say, CO2 footprint. On the other hand, to do this via a social channel, you can reach people. And I saw that especially topics, how the industry is transforming, how topics like recycling, new raw materials come up. Those are topics which are not covered so broadly in, let's say, university studies. On the other hand, they are crucial for people to know and to learn to join the industry, because that's something which is, once your industry is on your mind every day, that's part of our transformational journey beyond, let's say, the technicalities of running a chemicals business.
Yeah, I'm taking notes. I think this is very inspiring, right? So how do you actually manage, right, as a leader in supply chain, right? First, really learn how to prioritize what is the most important things to tackle, and then use automation, tech to automate, right? Save your time, empower the team, delegate, make them actually cover some important responsibilities. And then what makes you stand out is really always connecting to new ideas, new technologies, also new way of working, connecting to new generation. That's impressive.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a lifelong learning, but I get inspired by learning new things. Again, when I look at my career, when I went into production, of course, I really had to learn how production works. If you're a chemist in the laboratory, it's a different job once you run in a plant and you're legally responsible, accountable for everything that you do. It comes with a lot of recognition, but it comes with a lot of responsibility. Then when I stepped into some of the manufacturing, we had very special processes with controlled chemicals. I had to learn a lot. But now, even after more than 25 years stepping into supply chain, there's completely new areas which I'm now responsible for. Let it be international trade compliance, may it be customs rules, which are very crucial. You can imagine, just think about global trade laws, talk about sanctions, talk about all these topics. We are responsible for making sure that compliance is 100% held at the company. And I had to learn these topics, not to the level of the experts in our teams who do this on a daily basis, but on the other hand, being able to understand the complexity of the work and guide and lead them. On the other hand, for me, it's always been inspiring to learn something new and extend my knowledge. And then still coming back, maybe there's a customer complaint and it's really about an application, and we get very much into chemistry. And all of a sudden, I'm back 25 years and can really apply the chemistry that I learned to understand maybe the technical issue at the customer and provide a solution. So it's the breadth of the topic that has really helped also to be able to cover. But you need to be able to also go back to school one point in time. But I've always enjoyed that.
Thank you for sharing that. So it sounds easy, but I know it's not easy because the chemical sector is going through huge challenges. Yes, I'm sure you have a lot to tackle. And share with us what is supply chain in the chemical sector is like, and what are the challenges you're facing?
Yeah, a good question. Let me put this into two parts. Maybe I talk a little bit about, let's say, the phases that I see how supply chain overall has developed, and then also talk about the future, talking about sustainability and circular economy. But even when you look at the last couple of years, what was the supply chain? Let's go beyond. That was before my time, but we all know it also before the times of Corona. Supply chain was very much optimized on cost, which is very understandable. Supply chain is a significant cost. The smallest cost we have, let's say, is our own people. The largest cost is, of course, the cost that we manage with our suppliers, with all the transportation companies to bring the materials. And we're moving large volumes. Our plants, our world scale plants, typical plants, let's say for MDI, which is a raw material for insulation, these plants have 300 to 500,000 tons of capacity. So when you break that down to 20-ton isotainers and trucks, you see what kind of volumes we are moving, and that's per region. So it's really large volumes, and it was cost optimized. Then, and I joined in the middle of Corona, it was really the times of constraints. Nothing was available. We talk about the chip crisis. We had and you saw what the Suez at that point in time, what the Evergreen incident at that time really caused. And of course, with driver shortages and everything that has happened in the world, especially in Europe with war breakout, it has been a topic of constraint, with skyrocketing cost and prices in some areas, but also with the sheer problem of availability. That has changed now again into a phase with especially the chemical industry is facing in Europe is a demand issue. We have seen that customer confidence is not to the level where it was. So we see that for instance, the construction sector due to inflation, interest rates has slowed. So the entire chemical industry, especially in Europe, sees a problem with the demand. We have also delivered 20% below previous years. And at the same time, we are faced with energy costs, which are still double what they used to be before, and double also when we compare to areas like United States or China, which changes the global picture. It used to be very much that due to the large volumes, every region would very much produce for the region outside of certain specialties which are shipped globally. That's very different, for instance, than in pharmaceuticals, where usually one production plant will deliver the entire world. But for chemical materials, like we are producing business to business, it's for the big regions, Europe, let's say Asia, especially China, and North America, especially United States, it would be the case. With the change of this cost picture, the arbitrage between the region gets so big that it can actually be favorable from the European perspective not to produce in Europe due to, let's say, significant lower energy costs, and still with the transport and everything to ship that. So supply chains are changing. Also, what is required for global shipments and imports. And we've seen examples from companies closing larger plants in the heart of Europe and supplying from a smaller plant from another region. And that tells you already, if that is a case, if that makes a business case, that tells you how much the arbitrage needs to be in order to make that still the more profitable option. So what is happening is really from, let's say, the first phase of, let's say, cost optimization in supply chain in chemicals, then of the phase of total constraints, let's say, around Corona and the ongoing war and everything beyond. We're probably coming into a phase now where resilience is the key. Nobody knows what's going to happen next, but we need to prepare. If somebody asks me, okay, how many unplanned outages you are planning, you know what the question means. Of course, I cannot plan for it. On the other hand, I know when you look at what is happening, we will have constraints. We know we might have port closures. We know we might have more strike situations. We know we might have other global constraints. And we need to prepare for that in order to have a resilient network that can at least bounce off one or the other. And we have invested in there, always with the right balance to say, okay, we cannot overshoot costs, but where it needs to be to have, let's say, a certain hub for a certain region to be delivered. So the customer, once the customer orders, doesn't get all the long supply chain, let's say, with the risk in between. That's something we see definitely as a trend for the industry happening right now.
You talk about resilience. You didn't talk
Yeah.
about agility, right? So because you're dealing with a huge volume, would agility be also part of the strategy that you're facing the unknown?
Yeah, the agility for our industry means in order to react if there is a disturbance. Usually our industry is not shaped, let's say, so much, let's say, as the parts industry about to be super fast or super just in time. You see, we have rather large players like ourselves, and then you have a large customer base also of mid-sized, smaller companies, for instance, that make foams for certain materials. They need a stable supply chain. They need to plan their production accordingly. They might not have a lot of storage because it's chemical controlled substance that they have to store. So it's not for them, it's not about how fast always, but it's also how reliable. Give me a date, and I can plan for accordingly, but you need to be able to keep that date so I can schedule my production shifts, whatever it takes in order then to make my manufacturing. So, and then what is your backup plan? Let's say if the train doesn't go, can you take a truck or a barge? No? Is that already played out? And then agility means you see the topic coming, you see that you might not be able to hit the target desired date. Can you switch modalities and still deliver it on time in full as it's promised to the customer? That's something that our customers value.
So what I heard is that the demand issue, energy cost, and then also the future unknown, right, would be really you are going to tackle. And how are you going to manage your supply chain in the next years?
Yeah, one other topic I haven't spoken about because that really goes much into is then the transformation into sustainability. We have a major undertaking of transforming our company to be, our vision is to become fully circular. What does it mean? Today, very simply, all raw materials are mostly based on crude oil. The petrochemical industry makes certain intermediates, and we buy those intermediates, we make our products from it, and we sell it again to materials manufacturing. They make the foam for the insulation, they make the foam for the comfort, or they make the plastics for the cell phone or whatever out of it. And then end of life, and the material gets disposed, maybe incinerated. We are changing those supply chains to become circular, or as we said, everything that we do is based on carbon. And our goal is that the carbon doesn't escape as CO2, then it escapes, but we keep the carbon in the system. So what does it mean? First of all, we need a lot of energy because our processes are energy intensive, and we're changing that energy to renewable energy. And you've seen us buying more and more renewable energy to contracts. We have a part in a wind park that's been built in the North Sea. We have similar contracts in China, in Houston, really transforming all the energy that we are using to renewable energy. And we are determined to reduce the so-called scope 1 and 2, so our production CO2 footprint, including the energy, 60% by 2030 and down to 100% carbon neutral by 2035. On the other hand, this scope 1 and 2 is only about 20% of our entire carbon footprint. 80% is from other topics, and they are by far the biggest portion. 75% of that is coming from raw materials. So as I said, coming from crude oil to the petrochemical industry. And we are changing that dramatically by using materials which comes either from other sources, for instance, from sources that can be grown. We have developed processes that are based, we can make one of our key intermediates now for the hard foam sector based on a material that comes from sugars. So it can be regrown. There's a biotechnology step, then there comes a chemical step, and we get to this material. So it does not take the crude oil source, or we are buying the original substances that we need, but they also come from recycled fats, from other plant sources. So they don't take, let's say, fresh carbon out of the crude oil. And on the other side, we are developing the process that our products, after use, also that carbon doesn't escape by being incinerated, but actually comes back. So we have developed processes, for instance, for mattresses, how mattresses can be brought back into the process. You have to understand, you cannot take a mattress and do mechanical recycling, because if you shred it, you can never make a foam again out of it. So you have to do chemistry. So Mattresses need to be collected, need to be shredded and compacted, but then we take a chemical step that we have developed, making actually an intermediate back out of it. And that intermediate can then be fed back into the process. But still, the carbon cycles, and as long as the carbon cycles, we don't need to take fresh from crude oil. This is how we're changing the raw material base. It was a long description, but what I was trying to illustrate is you see how, let's say, a rather simple linear supply chain from intermediates from the petro industry to our products to our customers' products is now changing to all kinds of different raw materials, whether they come from plant sources, from fats, whether they come from recycled materials. We're changing the internal processes. We're creating those circular supply chains with the recycled materials. So a lot of new flows, a lot of new supply chains actually have to be created. And that's a big topic. And as I said, also the cake is even much bigger.
Right.
80% again is the so-called scope 3, but we are determined to take the first 10 million tons CO2 out by 2035 by all of these technologies that I have described. And this is really a large transformation in the industry, in our processes, but also for my team as the supply chain to making sure all these things are happening with the same effectiveness and efficiency as we've done for the linear supply chain.
That sounds very exciting. I want to challenge you here because we also heard voice, right, against sustainability, not because it's not good, it's great, but then the voice is that sustainability is a pure cost, right? How do you challenge this voice that you can use sustainability to create real value and create new revenue? So I heard that you're actually working with the upstream, your supplier, and how do you actually serving your customers, right, on the packaging, and then also then to more than FMCG sectors, right? How do you actually create value there and then add the competitiveness of a Covestro there?
Yeah, you touched an important aspect. As I said, our scope 3 is actually the scope 1 and 2 of our suppliers. So we are working with our suppliers, and we just had a larger supplier event after we have published our scope 3 targets, saying now we need to start working even closer together, you developing, let's say, alternative raw materials, and we can use them to the so-called mass balance process. We can feed them into our system. That will reduce our carbon footprint, and that will have the value for our customers, who again have to reduce your carbon footprint. Yes, new technologies do have additional cost, especially when you start them, because they don't have the economy of scale yet. Plants are really smaller and have to be sized up. On the other hand, what is the overall price? You know how things will be developing. When you look at the carbon price, today carbon is cheap, or CO2, let's say, still has a cheap price. We know there's no alternative. It will develop. So with large investment in that, with scaling up, also with renewable energy, we've seen the same thing. At scale, we see now renewable energy being very competitive on the cost versus classical energy. And that development will also increase with, let's say, classical fossil energy becoming more and more, let's say, cost negative due to the CO2 and CO2 impact. And again, if we can take carbon into the system and don't have to buy fresh carbon because it comes from recycled materials, also those plants, those costs will be, on the other hand, have a positive effect. So on the long term, we see this is a non-alternative road to go, but it does take a lot of investment. And to be true, we cannot solve this alone. We need, for instance, large investments in renewable power done from all stakeholders across the entire continent, across the entire globe, to make that renewable energy available. We know from sustainable fuels, we're working with our suppliers, whether they are trucking company, barging companies. Aviation is not very big for industry, but also they talk about alternate fuels made, electro fuels made from electrolysis, whatever, hydrogen, battery cell power trucks. When you look at what's coming and how much demand is there, every kilo is sold 5 times, or every electrical truck has 5 companies wanting to buy. So it's also there really a matter of scale up. So we need, especially in the infrastructure and in the energy system, we need to increase everybody's investment in speed. Otherwise, this entire transformation will have a big challenge. Absolutely.
You're talking about very large scale, right, of
Mm.
collaboration to get
Yes.
done.
Mm.
And we also see the movement there, right? So, but the journey is long. So
Mm.
good luck with that. And hope it will work. And you also come back to technology. In
Yes.
the beginning of our chat, you mentioned, right, using automation. I'm very intrigued with that. So how do you use technology to automate supply chain to help you save time
Yeah.
and then save time for your other activities and then also empower your team?
Yeah, it's saving time because on one hand, let's say normal transactional things get automated so you can focus on the issue. But it's more than saving time. It's also enhancing the experience. Again, what you have as a customer in your private life, whether you order your food or your whatever you order, you have already experiences that the customers in the chemical industry don't have yet, but we're getting there. Of course, it's much more controlled. Not everybody can buy chemicals. It's also a very limited space, also of transportation companies, because you need to have special permits in order to be allowed to transport. But we're getting there. And the first step is the classical automation. So it's a classical front end. We call this order at Covestro. Now we have automatic connections to our larger customers. All these things can be done in the portal or online and be tracked. The second thing is, yes, where is my order? Where's my stuff? What is my estimated time of arrival? So tracking these things is also developing further and further. All these I would call classical automation, digital materials management, and so forth. The next generation that is coming on technology is, of course, also related to artificial intelligence. And that will take another large step. Because when you take now, today, you have to look at certain things, and let's say there's an issue, you have to gather information, and then you have to look at that information, maybe play scenario and make a decision. Maybe there's a constraint, so do you have an alternative, or maybe you have to go into allocation, which customers to save first because not enough material is available at that time. These things are today not automated based. The next step of AI will very quickly be able to generate all that data. And then even with a, let's say, setting that you give the system, make good proposals in the sense of what are we wanted to achieve here? What's the best solution as overall, or what's the quickest, or what's the low cost, or what is the looking at the most critical supply points and so forth. These things will be much faster be available, even to the point you can imagine another generation again, where we, let's say, we track even more. Today, we would, in the first step, we would probably, let's say, consult the machine, get all the data, and still make the human call. But we will come to the point that also we will only interfere, let's say, with the system if we feel like we want to give it a different guidance, but we will be able to give more and more on this, let's say, database decision management to a system, because the system does nothing else but just looking what is the, let's say, smartest way to operate that data. So that will have a very large impact also on the agility point, but also on the customer experience.
That sounds like a exciting journey. So
Yeah.
now you need people to do that, right? So
Yeah.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
When you're hiring new people, right?
Yeah.
Also connecting to the next generation, what are the top 3 qualities and skills you want to prioritize when you're hiring the talents of the future to help you, right, through this journey of
Yeah, it's a good question.
sustainability and technology?
You can imagine on one hand, it's quite challenging also for us here and there to hire, especially in supply chain. You have very specific jobs. As a chemical companies, of course, we have many chemists, many engineers, and one of the chemists, let's say, how many customs experts we have in a company. Of course, that number is much smaller because that's a very focused job, very specific quality. On the other hand, and if I may also refer to my own career, what has helped me? I had a rather broad basis, and then again on top, I was able to add certain things that I did not maybe bring at that point in time, starting from simple business economics up to, again, to very specific topics now like international trade compliance. So we don't expect our, let's say, new joiners to, unless they are really, let's say, hiring on a very specific expertise topic. If you join a team like supply chain, there's many ways, more from the technical, like I come, or more from the business perspective, have a really good understanding of those topics. On the other hand, the true skill is to collaborate and to be problem solving in that space, to use everything that you have, and also the topics that you are not an expert of, but to retrieve that. And again, this generation will have everything available. We already, at least from my perspective, I started even my research looking into libraries and looking into books. That was maybe then replaced by the generation who could use search engines and machines. But even that is not needed anymore, because the artificial machine will give you everything, and even write the email, even write the report, or write the whatever you need. So that's not the quality anymore to write reports. Of course, you need to be able to ask the right questions to get the right answers, and to be able to connect, to collaborate, and to adapt quickly to situations and troubleshoot it and see, what do I need here? What is available? What's not available? What problem are we trying to solve here? And how then to gather that quickly and to come to conclusions. These are skills in a very collaborative, very open way, based on, let's say, on a solid foundation, on, let's say, a more business or more technical background. Sorry, that's also a little bit broad, but that's really the skill we're looking for. Unless, again, we have very specific jobs where a very specific skill is being needed. But to making companies like ours successful, those are key, let's say, leadership skills.
Yeah, so these are really the soft skills, right? So I think that come back to the do we spot talent, and how do we develop talent? It's around the soft skill. How do you work with people? How do you connect the dots? How do you solve problem? How do you adapt? So these are the key ones that I got from your advice.
And I wouldn't even, sorry to say that, challenge you a little bit, I wouldn't even call it soft. Soft skills sound so hard skills, soft skills, almost looks like one is better than the other. These are skills. I would call them skills, and they are crucial skills, but you need to acquire them. Also, we work with student organizations together. Also, I'm in part of a network of companies developing talents together. And that's exactly what we give the talents, because that is something you really need to learn and practice, how to collaborate, how to solve topics where you only have 60% of the facts available and the problem is not so clear yet. That's the skill set you need to bring, but don't keep adding so many hard technical skills on top. Because again, a lot of things will be available very easy. The other things is really something that makes you be able to solve the topics on doing your job. So
very exciting.
Please don't take it this way, but soft should not sound weak. These are really crucial
definitely skills. Because also I have a 15-year-old son, right? He's lazy, not learning. I'm thinking that, okay, now what he's doing is really dealing with people. He goes around with a lot of friends, and he will learn the skills, how to work with people, how to collaborate, how to help each other. So I think these skills are very important for our future. So thank you for sharing your insight about leadership, about supply chain, about the sustainability and technology. And these are great insight, and I really enjoy our discussion. Thank you very much, Hanno.
Thank you very much, Fei. It was really great talking and great experience exchanging with you. Really appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to our podcast. If you like what you heard, be sure to go to alcottglobal.com and click the podcast button for all the show notes of the interview. Also, subscribe to our mailing list to get our latest update first. If you're listening to a streaming platform like iTunes, Spotify, or Stitcher, we would appreciate the kind review. 5-star works best to keep us going and our production team happy. And of course, share it with your friends. I'm most active on LinkedIn. So do feel free to follow me. And if you have any suggestions on what to do and who to invite next, don't hesitate to drop me a note. And if you're looking to hire top executives or transform your business, of course, contact us as well to find out how we can help. Thank you very much.